All right, so in this video, I want to talk about the new JST Compete Beginner Ring Muscle Up program. So what I want to cover in this video is I want to cover why I created the program in the first place. When looking at the market and looking at the ring muscle programs out there, I saw a need to do something different from what I usually see. So that's the first thing I want to talk about, why I think there is a different approach to the keeping ring muscle up. And secondly, I want to talk about my thoughts about the programming. So why it differs and what I think needs to be done in a different way to set someone up better for a keeping ring muscle up. So as already talked about, why did I create this ring muscle program? So when you look at ring muscle ups and the programs out there, most of the programming that I see around is focused on the string ring muscle ups. And you often hear that before you could do a chest to bar, before you could do a keeping ring muscle up, you need to have the strict one before you are allowed to get access to that one. There's some sense to it in that sense that the adequate strength for a strict ring muscle ups and adequate strength for a strict pull up will make sense for the basic pulling strength and the shoulder girdle control that you gain. But saying that oranges is faulty in my opinion. So first of all, this is not a strict ring muscle program. What I mean by this is if you actually look at a strict ring muscle up compared to a keeping ring muscle up, when you analyze the movement requirements from it, you can actually see that it's completely different exercises in itself. All the dynamic motion, all the strength requirements, the pulling patterns, everything is quite different. Of course, there's a lot of the same, but there's also a lot of difference in what the exercise requires from themselves. So first of all, I want to highlight that this is not a strict ring muscle program. It's more of a hybrid where we're going to focus on specific areas of both exercises. And where it differs mostly in the keeping versus the strict one is, first of all, when you do a keeping ring muscle up, you have the momentum of the kip. So this is a whole new skill set that you need to excel at to make your ring muscle up as efficient as possible. So when you do strict, it's all your arms doing the pull, the transition, and the dip. In the keeping ring muscle up, the more efficient you can be going from the arch to the hollow and gaining some momentum into the pull, the less energy you need to spend. So gaining efficiency and developing those movement patterns as good as you can will require some time set aside to practice that. The next one is the pulling patterns, the strength requirements. So when you actually analyze the pulling movement of a strict ring muscle up compared to a keeping ring muscle up, what you will notice is that the pulling patterns of arms is somewhat different from another. I will go into a little bit more detail when I have some videos later on, but that's the second point I want to cover today. The third one, and probably the most important one, is reactive forces. So in a strict ring muscle up, there is more or less no deceleration of any movement in the whole movement. So when you go through the pull and transition, all you got to do, in parentheses, you're gonna control the moment throughout. What you have in the more keeping ring muscle up is that when you create this dynamic pattern of gaining elevation, almost being weightless, transitioning over to the rings, and then have to catch yourself in on top of the rings. If your shoulder girdle and shoulder control is not adequately strengthened and ready for that sudden and powerful force that goes through the shoulders, that's where you see where people fall through the rings or collapse, or where you even see people end up on the other side of the rings. So if you don't have the adequate strength to decelerate yourself through what I'm going to walk you through in a minute, all through the different patterns, you're going to have some issues in different parts of your areas. So first of all, momentum of the kip. So as I addressed before, you see here the kipping, the strict ring muscle up here is purely a strict movement. You only have a dip motion pulling motion into a transition and then into a dip. There's no actual kip and dynamic effort that you need to control before you go into the pull. The whole focus is on the pulling effort. Over here on the kipping, what you see here is a basic kip swing. You go through the arch, transition back in, go for the hollow, transition back into the arch position, going back again, and utilizing that momentum to transition over the rings. So if you don't practice this in a sense that would allow you to be as efficient as possible, you're leaving some low-hanging fruits on the ground if you're not working on this. Pulling patterns. So again, same thing here, strict ring muscle up. What you see here in the strict ring muscle up is all the pulling action happens in a very straight down and close to the body approach. So there's no flaring out. There's a little bit for me here, but what you see is much more supinated grip where you're pulling straight down, letting your elbows come close to the body when you transition over. Compared to the kipping ring muscle up is when you go through that kip, you can see the elbows flaring out much more to the side, almost in a 90-degree angle before transitioning over to the rings. So the pulling direction is completely different from the strict ring muscle up compared to, not completely, but it's quite different from the two. And the final one, and probably the most important one, is the reactive forces that happen when you go through a strict ring muscle up compared to a kipping ring muscle up. So again, the strict ring muscle up, straight down, straight up. It's a very strict movement. There's no actual deceleration at any point. You're in control of the movement throughout pull, transition, and through the dip. But in the kipping ring muscle up, there's several phases throughout the movement that you need to be able to control. So the first one here is when you go through a pull, the body is weightless, you transition over the rings. This is where you're going to collide with your first deceleration. You're on top of the rings, moving down, and here you need to have the shoulder stability and the shoulder strength and control to be able to lock your shoulders and then redirect the forces upwards in the dip. Secondly, when you come from top of the rings and you're going down again for the second rep, you can see what's happening now is you're traveling in quite a fast pace downwards. If your shoulder is not ready to handle this deceleration from going on top of the ring all the way down into a lock position again, you will have trouble in your shoulders and you will at some point have an overuse injury. And for the final part is when you've gone through the first rep, going down into the second, you're decelerated through the downward phase. What's going to happen is your legs is going to swing backwards into the arch position. And this is where the third deceleration is going to happen. Here, what we're going to do now is what you have to do now is you have to decelerate your lower part of the body to redirect the forces back into a hollow position. Oh, sorry. If you don't have the adequate abdominal tension to redirect going from the arch position and back into the hollow position, if you don't have the abdominal tension to redirect that force, what will happen is that your shoulders, your lats, and your pecs is going to take over, and that will often also lead to shoulder nagging problems where you can feel that your shoulders is nagging during the ring muscle ups. So you have several different reactive forces that you need to prepare your body for before you actually swing yourself up and try and do the rep. So how we're going to do this then? So first of all, the basics is there for a reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to master the basics. We're going to do it through two different approaches. We're going to have an efficient movement pattern section where we're going to focus on the kip swings. We're going to focus on making you as efficient as possible in the arch and the hollow position so you can get as much as momentum throughout that motion and transition into the pulling phase. The second one is we're going to build the appropriate strength for the task. So listing all the different things that I just talked about in the last couple of slides, there isn't different strength requirements for the upper body that needs to be taken in consideration before you have someone doing a kipping ring muscle up. And it's not just making them do a strict ring muscle up, because that is not going to prepare them for catching, dipping, going back into the second rep, and doing that multiple times with your heart rate up and so forth. So we have the basics, we have the movement efficiency, we have the adequate strength, acknowledging that the two movements are different. And then how we're going to do it, we're just going to do it through steady progression, progression, and progression. We're going to start very isolated, very simple. We're going to take every part of the ring muscle up, split them apart, and then as you work yourself through the programming, what you see is that all those separate links is going to combine slowly into a one coherent movement, which is the ring muscle ups. So I hope this has answered a lot of your questions, and I hope that it will get you to your first ring muscle up. All right, thanks guys.